I realize 94% of you guys are not subscribed. It would help me if you hit that subscribe button and help me push the 500 subscribers. We're almost there, only 158 subscribers away. It will help me today if you sub to my channel. And now, enjoy the video.
The game industry has been in a very difficult place over the past several months.
Let's see what this is about. Final Fantasy VII. I've heard, I've heard, I've heard bad things about Square Enix over this last week. Like they were they were blaming Sony for their games not selling well, stuff like that. Which I know there's one person in the community probably older than you know probably rallying in his thing, but I don't think it was as bad as like saying, "Oh, it's just all this and that." But there's more factors to it than just Sony problem. That's it. I believe there's multiple factors to it than just that. And I believe the Final Fantasy games are doing quite decently well despite being on the PlayStation 5. So, but yeah, this is why I get all my Square Enix news, accurate 100% Square Enix news from Night Sky Prince, because he posts 100% accurate news. It's always 100% accurate. It's always 100% correct. Yes, sometimes he may have, even sometimes Night Sky Prince is wrong, but he'll go back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry for giving out incorrect information," then correct it. Because we're all human. We all do it. We all do it. But it's like, that's why I get like his information, because it's 100% accurate about what's going on with Square Enix. But I know Square Enix has been facing a lot of hardships lately. So just having to starting to have to say they lost money, or focusing less on a bunch of games and focusing more quality games. So yeah, let's see what this is about.
Layoffs, budget cuts, studios being shut down. The list just goes on and on and on. And this has also recently impacted Square Enix, posting a less than stellar annual report as well as announcing layoffs, with no sales update being posted for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Multiple video game analysts have commented on the situation, saying that the game has indeed underperformed. I find this to truly be a shame, because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the best Final Fantasy game that we've had in years, and arguably maybe one of the best ever. There is nothing pleasant about this situation. However, it does have me thinking, could this impact the development budget of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3? After all, if Rebirth didn't do particularly well, and the third part will sell potentially even less, it leaves me wondering what they're going to do with the third game to ensure profitability. So if you love Final Fantasy, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 98k, and we are almost there. Help us hit 100k before the end of the year. First of all, it's important to note that the budget is often set during the initial phases of development. This means that a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 probably already has its budget decided on. However, this doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. It is entirely possible that budget cuts could be made even while the project progresses. This is
true. Budget cuts could be made even when a project is progressing, and then they have to make certain cutbacks to certain aspects of the game and stuff like that. Certain features the game will have, stuff like that. So there could be a lot of features that they may want to implement that end up getting cut from Part 3, just because Square is kind of struggling right now.
is usually the worst case scenario, as it often means that they had already decided on the scope and then have to rework several things within the game in order to accommodate for a new lower budget. This becomes a troubling thought when you realize the insane scope of Part 3. The weapon fights, Wu-Tai, whatever is going on with the multiple worlds, playable Zack sections, the High Wind, all of the new mysteries, as well as the OG content concluding. As typical of most trilogies, with some notable exceptions, exceptions like Mass Effect or The Witcher 3, but more typical and very typical of Final Fantasy sequels, it's likely that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 will sell even less than Rebirth. After all, most of the people playing Part 3 will also have been the people who played and completed Part 1 and 2. The drop-off there is simply natural and makes sense, but it's also why spending the same amount of money or more on Part 3 could be a potential risk. The counterpoint to this might be Sony exclusivity is up. Square Enix has said that they are targeting multi-platform now, and all the other platforms this is going to be available on will certainly make up for the
Damn. So they announced that multi-platform is up. Sony exclusivity is up. That means the next third part will be on multiple platforms, which is a good thing. So they could still make up the money by it being multi-platform. I know. That could be a good thing. That could make up the money by it being multi-platform. Usually, when a Final Fantasy game is multi-platform, it usually does better than just being on, say, a single platform like Sony and stuff like that. So this could mean the game could make up its money, but at the same time, they might start to make budget cuts because they are losing money. And like I said, the install base is going to be smaller for the third part because it's going to be most people that played the first two parts already, and they're not going to be able to get a newer fan base to play the third part until these other two parts come out on multiple other platforms. I'm kind of hoping the rumor is true that they're going to be releasing Remake and Rebirth on the next Nintendo console. I'm kind of hoping that's true, because if that's true, that could allow them to have a bigger install base when the third part, say, comes out on the next Nintendo console. I'm honestly thinking the third part isn't come out on the next Nintendo console, and allowed to have a bigger. Maybe in some miracle they do increase the install base by having Rebirth and Remake as a dual pack on the next Nintendo console, and then it just sells better on there. So yeah, it might. They could make up the sales. They could make up the
fact that this is the third part, which typically would sell the least. Maybe. It's pretty likely that with the budget already set in place, that they might have already signed the deal with Sony again. It's really unknown whether or not they sign the entire trilogy at once, or if they do this on a game-by-game basis. However, it's entirely possible that this was signed before Rebirth even released. However, the end of the trilogy releasing on all platforms at that point, I'm not entirely sure if that would have the tremendous impact that we would hope for in this situation. It'd be difficult for me to imagine it blowing up the third part when other platform owners wouldn't have been playing the first two games. That being said, I don't think it's impossible for Remake and Rebirth to have Switch 2 ports, and I think that in particular will make the biggest difference in Japan. It's hard to say how much of a difference that Final Fantasy VII Remake's PC port made. We know that in 6 months the game sold 5 million units on PlayStation 4. That is officially confirmed numbers. The other officially confirmed number that we know is that Final Fantasy VII Remake in total has sold 7 million units. This means that the Integrate version and the PC version are at least a huge part of that 2 million window gap, including anything else that the PS4 version sold after that announcement and before the release of Integrate. Now, with all of this said, Part 3's budget might be lower anyways. There's going to be a huge benefit here thanks to a tremendous amount of asset reuse. Rebirth already gave us a fully fleshed out world map, which is going to be reused in the next game, along with a dozen other assets that will be used, such as character models of the main cast, code for things like the battle system, and much more. For example, they won't be making Queen's Blood from scratch. However, I think it's safe to assume they'll most likely be bringing it back, making some new improvements or twists on it, but in either case, it won't be as expensive as developing that minigame from scratch. Though in fairness, there have also been people that have said that Rebirth is just simply too much game, and they believe the game could have benefited from actually having a lot less in it. Now, I know a lot of you in the comments are definitely going to push back on that, as you always want as much game as possible. I honestly don't have a clear take on this either way with this specific game, but it is important to note that there are some people that like to see the next game be a bit slimmer, and for the
Yeah, there are some people that would like to see the next game be a little bit Yeah. I'm feeling a little bit better. I'm drinking a lot of electrolytes and stuff like that to make myself feel better. And I took some Tylenol to help my head feel a little bit better, to make my head not hurt. But yeah, but yeah, I'll get to your comment in a minute, Game Freak. But yeah, honestly, I do know some people that honestly said they wanted less game for the third part, just because they felt like there was too much game, there was too much to do in the world map of Rebirth. So yeah, I will kind of agree and kind of disagree, because I like that there was a lot to do in the world map, but sometimes yes, it can get overwhelming. It can get like, oh well, I gotta do this and that. There's too much here, too much there, too much this, too much that. And I mean, it can get overwhelming at times. But honestly, I feel like I just already felt like the third game was going to be less game than Rebirth. Already felt like it was, because like I said, Rebirth was the middle part, and like Night Sky Prince said, the middle parts always do better of games. Like except Xenosagas. Looking at you, Xenosagas episode 2. That was a horrible middle part. Uh, but usually the middle part of games do better than the end or beginning. Uh, so so yeah, so yeah. I already thought the third game was going to have less of game than that, but the budget for it, I can see it being cut back a little bit, and I'm cutting back on a little bit of stuff, but at the same time, I don't see it being as bad as what people are going to make it out to be. I still think it's going to be a great game, and I still think it will probably sell well, especially if say the first two parts come out on the next Nintendo console, they release this third part on it too, or multi-platform. But then we get in, like we said, we don't know if the multi-platform, if the exclusive deal was signed game by game basis, or if it was signed overall throughout the whole entire project, as it being a Sony exclusive throughout the whole entire project. I'm more banking on it was signed as a game by game basis, but then again, we don't know. It could have been signed as a whole deal, and then the third part be a PlayStation 5 exclusive because of the deal they made. Then again, they could go back on that deal and then change it up.
Devs, it gives them an out. Instead of saying that, oh, this and this happened with the budget, you can simply say, well, people didn't like all of the mini games, so we decided to reduce the total volume in this one. Please look forward to it. Though to be clear, I think that if Part 3 is a bit more concise, I don't necessarily think that'll be a bad thing either. I do think that pacing usually improves whenever a game's main story content is a bit shorter. All of this being said, Square Enix is ultimately faced with two decisions here. The first one being the one that I assume everyone, as well as myself, hopes for, and that is that Part 3 will see no significant scale down whatsoever, ensuring the same quality or greater than Rebirth's. The second is a logical seeming option from a business perspective, but in my opinion would hurt them more than any potential financial losses could, cutting the game's budget or scaling down to ultimately mitigate any potential losses. The morale damage that would be done would hurt more than this game breaking even or losing money. It would damage the one thing as a company that you cannot pay for. It would fundamentally damage brand loyalty. For the core audience, they would not trust Square Enix anymore. It's something that would damage the brand beyond repair in my opinion, and that brand loyalty is something that can't be simply purchased back at a later time. Of course, Square Enix has stressed previously that they need to grow FF to reach new audiences, and although this project didn't end up doing that in a tremendous, major way, for the core Final Fantasy fan, for the core Square fan, this trilogy has been something absolutely essential and something that has enriched their lives. So at this point, I don't think that there is any backing down. This being said, I do think that the Final Fantasy VII re-trilogy has given them the tools, the game design that they need to appeal to that wide audience. While playing Rebirth, I could only imagine how impactful this game would have been if it were Final Fantasy XVII. This volume of quality content set in a brand new accessible world with brand new characters, story, assuming that it got the same score, a 92 on Metacritic, and newcomers seeing that there was this brand new game that they could hop into or have any knowledge of anything else, I think that as a Final Fantasy 17 would have done incredibly huge numbers. Of course, as I previously
I agree. I believe it would have did huge numbers as a new Final Fantasy game if it wasn't attached. Even I've said the Godsu, like a lot of people were comparing this to the original and comparing it to the original because it does have the same. It's part of the original Final Fantasy VII. But even I've thought if this was a new Final Fantasy game, if this wasn't attached to the original Final Fantasy VII, I honestly think it would have did way better. I honestly think it would have did way better, and it would have got a lot more fans into it. I think if this was Final Fantasy 17 and not, then it's like, oh well, it's part of seven is part of this. Like I know people that like there was a guy in my community who that always compared it to the original and how it released and the pricing to the original. But it's like that's when I hated about it because people always compare it to the original. Whereas here's the thing: if this was a new Final Fantasy, a new everything that wouldn't have anything to compare it to, I think this would have sold even better. Especially if it was multi-platform, would have sold even better, and it would have did great. It would have been great. Honestly, I feel like the game design in this could have been great as its own new Final Fantasy, but it's attached to seven, and that's one thing that sucks.
previously mentioned, one of the barriers with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was that at the very, very least, players felt like they needed to play Remake first. Square Enix was aware of this, and they saw this as potentially bottlenecking their sales. Hence why such a strong part of the marketing was that you can start at Rebirth. I get the sentiment behind it. However, the thing is that people don't look at the company's marketing information, or post it on social media and ask other people where they can hop in. In my experiences running a very large RPG community, being chronically online on Twitter, and also observing real-life conversations about these topics, whenever someone considered even hopping into the first Remake game, people would immediately point them to OG and say that Remake is actually a sequel, and they stress that you need familiarity with the original game in order to truly get this remake. Now I know there's going to be pushback on that, as many people believe that this is still a remake in the traditional sense. Currently, we don't know. Sequel theories are valid, this just being a remake with extra twist, however you want to call it. There is literally no way to prove or disprove this at the current time, and everyone has their own reasons that they've personally cherry-picked in order to believe what they do. However, one thing is fairly objective. A sizable number of people believe that this is a continuation of Final Fantasy VII, that is some sort of sequel or rebuild. I recently polled our community on this exact topic, asking them to fill in the blank. Final Fantasy VII Re-Trilogy is with 29% saying sequel, 13% saying remake, 54% saying rebuild with a new ending such as Evangelion, and 4% saying other. So there is this strong fan perception of this being
Yep, 20, and I will honestly agree with that. I'll honestly agree with that. A lot of people do see this as either a sequel or a rebuild. Like even I saw it as the rebuild, like the Evangelion movies. Even I've tried to compare it to Gatsu and other people like that. So it's more like the Evangelion rebuild movies, where the rebuild Evangelion movies started out as following the original storyline of the original Evangelion, but then they branched off to a new ending for Evangelion, rebuilding Evangelion and giving it a new complete ending that was satisfiable to fans to send it off and never come back to it. And just say, look, this is our final send off to Evangelion. We're done with it. That's how I felt about the whole Final Fantasy VII remake series, Final Fantasy VII Re-Trilogy, is that it was going to give a new ending to Final Fantasy VII in the same sense of rebuild, while still trying to follow a little bit of the original, but give it a complete ending that fans would be happy with, where they'll send it off, never come back to it again, be like done with it. Like this is the final ending of Final Fantasy VII. This is the new ending, the new complete ending for the whole entire series. So I did feel like that. I did feel like this was gonna more be like a rebuild series than anything else, and I do understand what some people were saying it was a sequel, but it did feel more like a sequel with how the first part was. So yeah, honestly, I can see it being that. But then like again, that would affect the third game's sales, stuff like that, and they had to make budget cuts and cut back the game. But and like I said, I think that will hurt brand loyalty, like Night Skybrand said, to the brand, just because you react, oh wow, now I can't trust Square Enix. I can't trust them to do stuff like that, and it would just ruin Square Enix and make it feel like nobody could actually trust them to make a good Final Fantasy game. So I'm hoping they don't cut it back. I'm hoping it is multi-platform, and I'm hoping it does make up a lot of sales that it was lacking with this part.
Being a sequel to a remake sequel, there's no way to know what effect that ultimately had, but I imagine it couldn't have been conducive for getting new players to come into the game. I want to see the very best for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, and I want this trilogy to conclude in an incredibly satisfying way. And I hope, despite all of the circumstances and the game industry literally falling apart, that Square Enix will still be able to deliver.
Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch to join the Shao Dynasty today.